Weddings are supposed to be beautiful. That's what people tell you what you see in glossy magazines and endless movies. They're meant to be the start of something bright, a chapter that opens with joy and promise. But when I think about my wedding day, the first word that comes to mind is not beautiful. It's ruin. Because in one carefully timed toast, my mother destroyed everything: my marriage, my family, and the fragile sense of identity I had spent years building for myself. I was 27 years old when I walked down that aisle, my satin dress brushing softly against the floor, my heart pounding so loudly I thought everyone in the church could hear it. To the outside world, I looked like any other bride, radiant, glowing, consumed by love. But inside, I was a girl still aching from old wounds, trying to convince herself she deserved happiness. My name is Margaret, though most call me Maggie, and my life until that moment had been a mosaic of broken pieces, glued together with hope and denial. I grew up in a small town on the coast of Maine, where the air always smelled of salt and secrets. My father Thomas was my anchor. He was gentle with kind eyes that seemed to smile before his lips ever did. He taught me how to bake bread on cold winter mornings, how to ride a bike down the gravel road without fear of falling, and how to find wonder in the smallest things: a seashell, a bird's nest, a handwritten note. He was the one who made me feel safe. And then, when I was 14, he was gone. My mother Evelyn told me he had left us for another woman. I still remember the way her voice dripped with disdain when she said it, as if she wanted me to hate him as much as she did. But I couldn't. I couldn't reconcile the man who kissed my forehead every night and whispered, "Dream big, my girl," with the man she painted as a coward, a traitor. I tried to believe her because she was all I had left, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. He hadn't left any signs of wanting to run. He hadn't fought with her in those last weeks. One night he was there, and the next morning his side of the closet was empty. No note, no goodbye, just silence. From then on, my life with Evelyn was suffocating. She demanded perfection from me: grades, posture, manners, even the tone of my laugh. She would tilt her head and say, "A Whitlow girl must never appear weak." So I smiled when I wanted to cry, obeyed when I wanted to scream, and learned to silence the part of myself that longed for comfort. I kept telling myself that if I did everything right, maybe one day she would look at me and see more than a project she was determined to perfect. When I met Daniel in college, it felt like a lifeline. He was different from anyone I had ever known: steady, patient, endlessly kind. He listened, really listened, in a way that made me feel seen. His family was warm and loud, the kind who hugged before even asking your name, who filled rooms with laughter instead of criticism. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had found a home outside of the walls I grew up in. I wanted that. I needed it. But I also knew that with marriage came the question of family, and that meant involving Evelyn. She was more than eager. She wanted to plan the seating chart, dictate the flowers, even criticize the gown I had chosen. "Too plain," she said, pursing her lips, though I had chosen it because it made me feel free. Still, there were moments when I saw something softer in her eyes, when she adjusted my veil at the fitting or fussed over my hair. Those fleeting glimpses of affection kept me hopeful that maybe, just maybe, this day would be the beginning of a new chapter. Not just for me, but for us. The ceremony was everything I wanted it to be. The church glowed with light pouring through the stained glass windows. Daniel's eyes were locked onto mine, and for a few precious minutes, it felt like joy was something I was allowed to have. We said our vows, exchanged rings, and kissed to the sound of applause. I remember thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe the curse of loneliness ends here. The reception began with laughter, music, clinking glasses. I danced with Daniel, with my bridesmaids, even with my mother. And then, as the evening settled into warmth, it was time for the speeches. I expected my mother to give something polished and restrained, maybe even affectionate. She stood at the microphone in her navy dress, her champagne glass shimmering in the light, and began with words that made me hold my breath. "My daughter has always been a fighter," she said, her voice steady. "She's had to be because life has not always been kind. Her father left us when she was just a girl, and I had to raise her alone. I did my best, but the truth is, there are things she deserves to know." A hush fell over the room. My stomach tightened. This wasn't the toast of pride or love I had hoped for. This was something else. Evelyn's gaze locked onto mine, sharp and unrelenting. "The man you called your father Thomas was not your real father. Your true father was someone else, someone I tried to keep hidden to protect you. But today, as you begin your own family, you deserve the truth." Gasps rippled through the guests. My breath caught. The world tilted. My father, the man who had taught me love and patience, wasn't mine. My entire childhood cracked in an instant, shards of memory cutting into me from all sides. She continued, her tone calm, almost relieved. "Your real father was a man I loved before Thomas, a man I could not be with. I chose to let Thomas raise you to give you stability. But lies have a way of surfacing, and I can no longer carry this one. You deserve to know who you are." The room blurred. I felt Daniel's hand tighten around mine, but even his warmth couldn't reach me. The sound of whispers filled the air, pitying, curious. My mother raised her glass, serene, as if she had given me a gift instead of detonating a bomb. The rest of the night was a blur. Faces blurred by shock and curiosity, voices speaking my name like it was foreign. My bridesmaids avoided my eyes. Daniel tried to calm me, but I was beyond soothing. I wanted to scream, to run, to rip off the dress that suddenly felt like a costume. My mother floated through the crowd with a calm smile, untouched by the chaos she had unleashed. When Daniel and I finally escaped to our hotel room, I broke apart. I sobbed until my body shook, until I couldn't breathe. "Why would she do this?" I whispered over and over, as though Daniel might somehow summon an answer. He held me tightly, but I could feel the same helplessness in his silence. In the morning, as sunlight crept across the sheets, I felt something shift inside me. Beneath the grief, beneath the humiliation, something hot and sharp began to burn. Rage. My mother had stolen something from me, my identity, my history, my right to know the truth about myself. And she had chosen the most public, most devastating moment to reveal it, not for my sake, but for hers. I couldn't let it end there. So I began to dig. I went through boxes in our attic, searching for scraps of the past my mother might have hidden. I found a photograph tucked into the pages of an old yearbook. My mother was younger, standing beside a man I didn't recognize. Her smile was different, softer, genuine. On the back, written in messy handwriting, were the words, "To my Evelyn, forever yours." I traced the man's face with my finger. Could this be him? The man she spoke of? The man she claimed was my father? The more I searched, the more I uncovered. A necklace with a locket that held only a lock of dark hair. Receipts from restaurants in towns my mother had never mentioned visiting. And finally, a bundle of letters tied with ribbon, though most had been torn, leaving only fragments. Words like "our secret someday," and "she will never know." Each discovery added fuel to the fire inside me. My mother had woven an entire tapestry of lies, and I had lived inside it for 27 years without even knowing it. Daniel begged me to stop, to let it go, to focus on the future we were building. But how could I How could I build a life when I didn't even know where I came from, who I came from? So I kept digging. I traced the photograph back to a college yearbook, found the man's name, Richard Callahan, and discovered he was still alive, a retired lawyer living 2 towns over. I stared at his address on the screen for a long time, my hands trembling. I didn't know if I had the courage to knock on his door. I didn't know if I could survive being rejected again, but the thought of not knowing was worse. And so, with my heart in my throat, I made a choice. The drive to Richard Callahan's house felt like crossing a threshold I could never return from. The road stretched endlessly, lined with pine trees, swaying in the coastal wind, and every mile closer made my chest feel heavier. I tried to rehearse what I might say. "Hello, I think you might be my father. Did you ever love my mother? Did you ever know about me?" But the words dissolved before they left my lips. When I finally pulled into the driveway of a modest 2-story brick house, my palms were slick with sweat. The garden was neatly trimmed roses climbing up a white trellis, and for some reason, that detail gutted me. My father, whoever he really was, had taught me to garden. What if that instinct wasn't mine at all, but a fragment passed down from someone I had never known? I forced myself to the door and knocked. When it opened, I saw him, a man in his late 60s with streaks of gray in his dark hair and eyes so piercing they seemed to stop me in place. For a second, it was like staring at a distorted reflection. His expression shifted from confusion to something else, recognition. "You're Evelyn's daughter, aren't you?" His voice trembled on my mother's name. "Yes," I whispered. "Then before I could lose my nerve, I think you might be my father." We sat at his kitchen table, 2 mugs of untouched coffee cooling between us. I told him everything: my mother's toast at the wedding, the photograph, the torn letters. His hands trembled as he listened, and when I finished, he exhaled shakily. "I always wondered," he said. "I always feared this day might come, though I wanted it too. Your mother made it clear she didn't want me in your life. She said she had a better option, that Thomas could give you what I couldn't. She told me to stay away, or she'd ruin me." His voice broke. "But make no mistake, Maggie, I wanted you." I tried to reach out. She blocked me at every turn. His words sliced me open. For years, I had believed my father abandoned me. Now, here was a man claiming the opposite, that my mother had stolen him from me. "Why didn't you fight harder?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. "Why didn't you come for me?" His eyes glistened. "Because every time I tried, Evelyn threatened to tell the world I was unstable, that I was dangerous. I was young, terrified, and she knew exactly how to manipulate me. I told myself staying away was protecting you. I didn't know whether to scream or cry. All I knew was that I had been robbed of a father's love, of the truth, of the right to grow up knowing who I was. Before I left, Richard handed me a small box. Inside was a stack of letters, carefully preserved. "These were for you," he said. "Every birthday, every Christmas, every time I thought of you." I never stopped. That night, I sat on my bed, reading them one by one. His words were filled with longing, regret, and love for a daughter he had never been allowed to hold. I clutched them to my chest, tears streaming down my face. For the first time, I realized my mother's betrayal wasn't just about me. It had stolen from him too. But when I told Daniel what I'd discovered, he gently suggested a DNA test. "You deserve certainty," he said. "Words and memories aren't enough." Richard agreed without hesitation, and we both gave samples at a local lab. I waited anxiously, heart thrumming with hope and fear. When the results came back, I opened the email trembling, praying it would confirm what I already felt in my gut. Not a match. The words punched me in the chest. I couldn't breathe. Richard wasn't my father after all. The man who had believed he was, who had written me letters and carried guilt for decades, wasn't bound to me by blood. I told him in person, and the devastation in his face nearly broke me. "I wanted you to be mine," he whispered. "Even if the world says you're not, you'll always be the daughter I lost." His kindness gutted me. Because as much as I longed for a father, I couldn't rewrite biology. I thought maybe this would end my search, that I would accept not knowing. But then I found the hospital bracelet. I was back in my childhood home, rifling through boxes in the attic. Beneath quilts and Christmas decorations, I discovered a shoebox with brittle hospital bracelets tied together with string. One bore my mother's name. The other was pink small, meant for an infant's wrist. The ink was faded, but still legible. Baby girl Rivera. Rivera, not Whitlow. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. My stomach dropped. Had I been adopted? Had Evelyn stolen me from someone else entirely? At the bottom of the box was a folded discharge form. It listed the attending midwife M. Hale. The name rang in my chest like a bell. I searched records obsessively until I found her daughter Claire, who ran a small bed and breakfast 2 towns over. When I explained who I was and what I'd found, she invited me over. In her cozy inn, she pulled out her late mother's journals, meticulous notes of births she had assisted. Together, we found the entry for the week I was born. Rivera Lenora, it read. 19, alone, frightened, baby healthy, private adoption arranged. Father unknown. Agency handled paperwork off-site. Met with E. Whitlow 2 days prior. Payment processed by Administrator Martin H. Martin H. My blood turned cold, because Martin Hale wasn't just a hospital administrator. He was Daniel's father. I drove home in a daze. My mind screamed as possibilities tangled. Could my husband's father have arranged my adoption? Did he know? Did Evelyn and Martin conspire together? When I told Daniel, his face drained of color. My dad chaired the hospital's board, he admitted. He always said it was where he learned about service, about giving back. But he never mentioned this. He called Martin that night, his voice taut with nerves. "Dad, what do you know about Evelyn Whitlow and a baby girl named Rivera?" The silence on the other end stretched too long. Then Martin said he wanted to meet. Tomorrow. I didn't sleep. At dawn, I sat staring at the window, convinced I was about to learn something I could never unlearn. When we arrived at Daniel's parents' house, the air was heavy with unspoken tension. Martin looked older, weighed down by something I could feel before he even opened his mouth. He told us everything. As a young administrator, he had overseen private adoptions. When Evelyn approached him, already married to Thomas, she demanded discretion. A young mother named Lenora Rivera had given birth to a baby girl. She had no family support, no resources. Evelyn wanted the baby. Martin arranged it quietly outside the legal system, convincing himself it was mercy. But it hadn't ended there. Years later, Evelyn threatened to expose him unless he continued to support her lifestyle. He had written checks for decades, calling them donations, knowing the truth was blackmail. "Are you my father?" I asked him, my voice low, trembling. His eyes widened in horror. "No, I swear to you, no. I facilitated something I never should have, but I did not father you." It was a strange relief knowing I wasn't bound by blood to my husband's family. But it didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't erase the fact that my entire identity had been forged through lies and deceit. I filed a petition to unseal the adoption records. Evelyn tried to stop me, furious, calling me ungrateful, warning me that digging too deep would destroy us all. But I no longer feared her. The truth was mine to claim, and I would not let her bury it again. When the judge granted my motion, I felt the ground shift beneath me. The file revealed what I had begun to suspect my birth mother, Lenora Rivera, had been 19, frightened, coerced into signing papers she didn't understand. She had begged to hold me one last time, whispered that she loved me, and then I was gone. Her address was listed. My hands shook as I traced the letters on the page. She was real. She had a name, and she was out there. I had spent my entire life believing I was unwanted. But the truth was different. The truth was that I had been wanted desperately by the woman who gave me life, by the man who thought I was his, by all the people my mother had pushed aside to protect her lies. And now, after decades of shadows, I was ready to meet her. Finding Lenora was easier than I expected and harder than I could bear. Her address from the file was outdated, but a trail of rental records and business licenses led me to a small town in upstate New York. There on the corner of a quiet street lined with maple trees was a flower shop with a peeling hand-painted sign, Lenora's Blooms. I stood outside for nearly an hour, staring through the glass window. Inside, bouquets spilled over every counter, wild and imperfect, nothing like the polished arrangements my mother would have approved of. There was life in that shop-color scent chaos. And then I saw her. She was arranging lilies in a vase, her silver-streaked hair pulled back loosely, her shoulders slightly hunched, as though the years had been heavier than her frame could carry. Her face was softer than I imagined, lined but gentle, and her eyes, dark deep, were the same shape as mine. When she looked up and noticed me standing there, the lily slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor. I pushed open the door, the bell above it chiming. The air smelled of roses and carnations, dizzying in its sweetness. "Margaret!" she whispered, uncertain, her voice breaking around the name. I nodded, my throat too tight for words. She stepped closer, her hands trembling in the air, as if she wanted to touch me, but feared I might vanish. I never thought this day would come. When her palm finally cupped my cheek, the weight of decades collapsed inside me. I wasn't abandoned. I wasn't unwanted. I was hers. We sat in the back of her shop for hours, sipping lukewarm tea surrounded by petals and stems. She told me everything. She had been 19, alone, terrified. Her parents had cast her out when they learned she was pregnant. She wanted to keep me, but the hospital insisted she had no choice. They told her I would be better off, that someone else could give me a stable life. "They let me hold you," once she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You were so tiny." And I whispered that I loved you, that I would never stop. "Then they took you away. I begged to know where you were going, but they told me it was sealed. They told me I'd never see you again." Her grief was raw, etched into every word, and I felt it seep into my own bones. For years, I had carried the weight of being unwanted. Now, in her eyes, I saw the opposite. I saw a love so fierce, it had survived decades of silence. "I never stopped thinking about you," she said, clutching my hand. "Every birthday, every holiday, every time I saw a little girl with dark eyes, I always wondered if she was you." I cried harder than I thought possible. I thought you didn't want me. I thought my voice broke. I thought my father left because of me. I thought I was the problem. She shook her head fiercely. "No, baby. None of it was your fault. You were stolen from me. That's the truth." Leaving that shop felt like leaving a piece of myself behind. But we promised to see each other again, to start building the relationship we had been denied. I left with her number, her hugs still clinging to me, and a bouquet she pressed into my hands, as though flowers could fill the years we had lost. When I told my mother Evelyn what I had done, she exploded. She barged into my house, her perfume sharp and suffocating, her eyes blazing. "How dare you dig into this?" she hissed. "Do you know what you've done? Do you know how dangerous this is?" "Dangerous," I spat. "The only danger here is the truth you've buried for decades. You lied to me. You lied to everyone. You stole me from my real mother and turned me into your possession." Her lips curled into a sneer. "I saved you. That woman would have ruined your life. I gave you everything, an education, a name, a family. And this is how you repay me, by running into the arms of the woman who threw you away." "She didn't throw me away," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "She was forced. You stole her choice, her child, her future. You stole me." For the first time in my life, Evelyn's composure cracked. Her voice rose shrill and desperate. "Do you think anyone will believe you? Do you think they'll side with a nobody like her over me? I am your mother, Maggie. I raised you. You owe me everything." I stood tall, tears burning my cheeks, but my voice steady. "No, I owe you nothing. You don't own me anymore." She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. I sank to the floor shaking, but for the first time, I felt free. Over the next months, I built a fragile new bond with Lenora. We met for lunches, visited each other's homes, shared stories of the lives we had lived apart. She showed me old photos of herself at 19, her belly round with me, her eyes bright despite the fear in them. I showed her my wedding pictures, the day that should have been about love, but became the day the truth was finally dragged into the light. Daniel supported me through it all, though I saw the strain in his eyes. His father's role in my adoption weighed heavily on him. Martin had confessed to us, but the shame lingered. He withdrew from his community boards, resigned from committees, retreating into the shadows. The man who had once been a pillar of the town was reduced to whispers and disgrace. And Evelyn, she became a recluse. The woman who had once commanded every room now barely left her house. Neighbors whispered about her downfall, about the scandal that had finally caught up with her. She sent me letters accusing manipulative, dripping with venom, but I never replied. I had nothing left to give her. One evening, I visited Lenora's shop again. She hugged me tightly, her hands lingering on my shoulders, as though afraid I might disappear. "I don't want to waste another second," she said softly. "We've already lost too much time. We began to build something real." She came to dinner with Daniel and me, her laughter filling the house in a way that felt healing. She taught me her favorite recipes, told me stories of her childhood. I began to imagine a future where my children could know her as their grandmother, where the cycle of loss and lies could finally end. But Evelyn wasn't finished. One night she called me. Her voice was raw, shaking. "You think you've won, don't you?" she said. "But you don't know the whole story. There's more. There's always more." Her words echoed in my mind long after she hung up. What more could there be? What else had she buried? The answer came weeks later in the form of a letter delivered to my house. It wasn't from her, it was from Richard. He had continued searching even after the DNA test proved we weren't related. He had hired a private investigator determined to help me find answers. The investigator had traced my birth records further back, uncovering something none of us expected. My birth father wasn't unknown. His name was listed in a sealed medical note overlooked until now. His name was Andrew Whitlow. My stomach dropped. Whitlow, my adoptive father's last name. But Thomas wasn't my biological father. Andrew was his younger brother. The truth hit me like a tidal wave. My birth father had been my mother's brother-in-law, my adoptive uncle, and my mother had married his brother to cover it up. I sat frozen, the letter trembling in my hands, the words burning into me. All these years, I had been living inside a labyrinth of betrayal. My mother hadn't just stolen me from Lenora. She had orchestrated an entire deception, binding me to the Whitlow name, while burying the scandal of my true parentage. The rage that surged through me was unlike anything I had ever felt. It was pure fire burning away any remaining illusion that my mother had ever acted out of love. I knew then that this wasn't just about uncovering the truth. This was about justice, about revenge, about making sure Evelyn and everyone who had colluded with her faced the consequences of the lives they had destroyed. And I was ready to see it through. The revelation about my father shook me to the core. Andrew Whitlow, my father's brother, my uncle. The scandal of it echoed like a scream trapped in a jar, rattling every memory I thought I understood. It explained so much the way my mother had always spoken about Thomas, with a kind of rigid pride, the way she had controlled the narrative so tightly. She hadn't just lied to me. She had built her entire life on a lie, and I had been the centerpiece of her elaborate deception. I couldn't keep it to myself. I drove to Lenora's shop that evening, the letter clutched in my shaking hands. When I showed it to her, her face went pale. "So she used you to keep her secret," she whispered. "She took you not just to have a child, but to bury her shame." Her words lodged in me like shards of glass. My existence had been reduced to damage control, a chess piece moved to protect her reputation. The rage that welled up inside me was blinding. Daniel, bless him, tried to calm me. "Maggie, you can't let this consume you," he said. "We've uncovered enough. We know the truth now. Maybe we should just live our lives." But how could I? My mother had destroyed everything: my childhood, my father's reputation, Lenora's motherhood, Richard's peace of mind. And now this final revelation tied it all together in a web of betrayal so dark it felt almost biblical. No, I couldn't let her retreat into silence. Not again. So I made a choice. I was going to expose her. I contacted a journalist from a regional paper, someone I trusted to handle sensitive stories. I laid everything out: documents, hospital records, the court's unsealed files, Richard's testimony, Martin Hale's confession. At first, the journalist was skeptical, but once she saw the evidence, her eyes widened. "This is bigger than just your family," she said. "This is about corruption, abuse of power, lives stolen. People need to hear this." When the article was published, the fallout was immediate. Evelyn's name, once respected in our community, became synonymous with scandal. Neighbors whispered not just behind closed doors, but in the open. Old friends turned their backs. The image she had spent decades perfecting crumbled overnight. She called me furious, her voice shrill with desperation. "How could you do this to me? To your own mother?" "You did this to yourself," I said, my tone cold, steady. "You destroyed me long before I ever spoke a word. I just told the truth." For the first time in my life, she had no reply. Only silence. But the story didn't just destroy her reputation. It stirred something in others. Within weeks, the journalist was contacted by 2 other women who claimed they had been coerced into private adoptions facilitated by the same hospital foundation. Stories poured out: young mothers frightened, pressured their children placed in secret arrangements to satisfy wealthy families. The scandal grew into something larger than my mother. It became a reckoning. And in that reckoning, I found a strange kind of healing. Lenora stood by me through it all. She testified publicly, her voice trembling, but strong, telling the world how her baby had been stolen. For years, she had carried the shame of believing she'd failed me, But now her truth was out in the open. And in her courage, I found my own. Richard, too, though not my biological father, remained a part of my life. He told me once quietly, "I may not share your blood, but I share your pain. And if you'll let me, I'll share your future too." Those words meant more than I could ever express. Daniel never wavered. Even when his father's involvement threatened to fracture us, he held my hand, reminding me that we were more than the sins of those before us. "We write our own story," he said, and for the first time, I believed it. But Evelyn? She withered. She rarely left her home. Her letters grew more erratic, swinging from pleas for forgiveness to bitter accusations. I stopped opening them. I had carried her voice inside me for too long. I refused to give it power anymore. And then one morning, I received the news she had passed away. A stroke, sudden in the middle of the night. I wish I could say I felt grief. I wish I could say some part of me mourned. But what I felt was something different. An emptiness, a hollow space where love should have been, and beneath it, a strange, quiet relief. Her power over me was finally gone. At her funeral, the church was half empty. People came out of obligation, not love. I sat in the back, away from the family pew. Daniel squeezed my hand. Lenora sat quietly beside me, and Richard stood near the aisle. When the priest spoke of Evelyn's virtues, I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. But then, I realized her legacy wasn't mine to carry anymore. She had chosen her lies. I had chosen truth. Afterward, I walked to the cemetery alone. I stood over her grave, the soil still fresh, and whispered, "You don't own me anymore. I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace." And in that moment, I felt something lift. In the months that followed, my life slowly found rhythm again. Lenora became part of my family. She taught me how to arrange flowers, how to cook her mother's recipes, how to laugh without apology. Richard became a kind of surrogate father, not bound by blood, but by choice. Daniel and I rebuilt our marriage scarred, but stronger, built not on lies, but on brutal honesty. When I think back to my wedding day now, I no longer see just the moment my life shattered. I see the moment the truth began to surface. Painful, humiliating, devastating, but necessary. Because only in breaking could I find the pieces that were truly mine to keep. And maybe that's what revenge really is. Not rage or destruction, but survival. To live despite the lies. To thrive despite the betrayal. To build something beautiful out of the ruins they left behind. So if you're listening to my story and you've carried wounds carved by people who were supposed to love you, hear me? You are not the sum of their lies. You are not their shame. You are more. You are your own. And the truth, however painful, will set you free. If my story touched you, please share it. Leave a comment with your thoughts because your voice matters too. And if you want to hear more stories like mine of family betrayal and the courage to reclaim yourself, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and stay with me on this journey.